I think a lot of people kind of hold up astral projection or the out of body experience as some great spiritual attainment. And it might be. But for others, it could just be an indication that you've had a lot of trauma and you dissociate. I think the emphasis on having the OBE, which is kind of what everybody wants, is misplaced. It doesn't mean that it's not very valuable. I think it's really valuable in overcoming the fear of death. But once you've had that experience, I think the value of it is greatly diminished. Consciousness is actually what is fundamental to all of reality. Like matter is derived from consciousness, not vice versa. And once you really understand that, like everything changes. There's this idea that the universe is holographic. So like each component of the universe kind of contains the whole, and that includes us. The way you tap into it is by modulating your vibrational frequency, which again goes back to sound. I think the only solution to a lot of our problems is for more people to start doing the type of work that we're talking about, accessing more of a heart-centered space that is built around feeling. What's the highest form of attainment or enlightenment or self-realization, self-actualization? It's boundless, infinite, and like constantly unfolding. And there are all types of realizations that you can have. And I don't think there's an endpoint to any of it.
Welcome to the Sound Healing Revival podcast. My guest today is Garrett Stevens. How you doing, Garrett?
Pretty good, man. Good to be with you, Nicholas.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I am super looking forward to picking your brain about so many questions that I've been wanting to ask you for a while now. So, I really see you as a leader in the sound healing space, but your work in sound healing is very niche, and it's not what people necessarily think of when they think of sound healing. And if you could just give us an overview, like if you were to describe what you do to someone that you randomly met, how would you describe that?
Good question, because I'm faced with that dilemma time and time again, and like every time the answer seems to come out a little bit differently. But let's see, for today, I'd say, Hemi-Sync, which is the company that I run, it's a company that was founded by Robert Monroe in the 60s. And for those that don't know, Robert Monroe is kind of a legendary figure within the altered states of consciousness space. He was known for coining the term out-of-body experience and wrote 3 books on the subject. But in an effort to try to replicate that experience or the state of expanded states of consciousness in others, he created an audio guidance technology based on complex, multi-layered binaural beats called Hemi-Sync, which is short for hemispheric synchronization. In terms of what we are, I would say we are a cross between an ambient record label and a mental health tech company.
Nice. That's a great explanation. Yeah, so this niche it's very technology based, and not all sound healing is technology based. Do you have like an elevator pitch for what binaural beats are, what the brainwave entrainment process is, that you could just share really quick?
Yeah, I do. So a binaural beat is a pretty old technology. It was originally created by a man named Dove in the 19th century. But the general idea is that the adult human brain doesn't hear anything below about 20 hertz. And that's unfortunate because there are a lot of very useful brainwave states under 20 hertz. And when your brain hears a frequency, it automatically tends to entrain to that frequency. So it matches it. So just kind of like a quick overview. So like from about half a hertz to 4 hertz, that's called delta. That's considered a sleep state. From about 4 to 8 hertz, that's theta. From 8 to around 14 hertz, that's alpha, which is a state of relaxation. Over 14 hertz, we're getting into low beta, which can be a useful state for concentration, tasks of vigilance. And then when you get into high beta, I'm forgetting like the exact cutoff for high beta, but high beta is not great. It's unfortunately the state that we spend a lot of our waking hours in as Western adults. If you're multitasking, you've got deadlines, you're stressed, you're in high beta. And it's not great because it means your body is injecting you with cortisol and adrenaline, and over time, that can be harmful to your health. But the way a binaural beat works is you put two frequencies, one into your left ear and one into your right ear, that are a little bit different. So let's say you put 100 hertz into your left ear and 107 into your right ear. Your brain automatically makes a third frequency, which is the difference between those two. So in that case, it'd be 7 hertz. It's called the offset. So that'd be a theta brainwave state. Then your brain starts to entrain to that brainwave state. And binaural beats have kind of become ubiquitous. You can certainly get them for free on YouTube or many other platforms. Hemisync is unique in that we use specific binaural beat recipes that are basically like sandwiches. Like they're multiple binaural beats combined in a single, what we call carrier. And these carrier packages, which are also sometimes referred to as focus levels, which is a term that Bob Monroe coined, they are associated with specific states of consciousness. And so we use these proprietary carriers or focus levels in 5 main application areas. So meditation, concentration, sleep, relaxation, wellness. And you could add a 6th as well, which would be manifestation.
Nice. Yeah, that's one of the things that I didn't realize at first about Hemisync is that it's not just one set of binaural beats that
Right.
are embedded into your music. It's multiple layers of binaural beats that have been scientifically tested and basically verified to induce a certain type of brainwave. And for those of you who are new to brainwave entrainment, it's one of the most well-studied things in the sound healing space, one of the most well-studied aspects of therapeutic sound. And the brain it's not this like powerhouse of, focus and consciousness that everyone thinks it is. It's actually quite susceptible to being entrained into different types of vibrations. And those different types of vibrations are associated with different types of consciousness, sleep, meditation, out of body experiences, which we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, that was one of the things that I didn't realize until not too long ago, that Hemisync was that sandwich of frequencies, which is very unique. Like you don't find that with other companies.
Mhm.
And with people just making this stuff online, like myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's super awesome. Okay. So I want to get into talking about you a little bit because I feel like you've got a really interesting story that I haven't fully gotten to ask you about. And I want to know, like, what was your life like before you stepped into this world of sound healing, the gateway experience, binaural beats, Hemisync? What were you doing? What was kind of your life at that point? And where was your life headed?
Yeah. Um, well, I guess it depends where you start, but I guess if you start in early adulthood, you'd say my life was pretty normal, pretty conventional. I'm married with 3 kids. I worked in finance prior to taking this turn into what I call conscious media and mental health tech. So I graduated Wharton. I went to work for an investment bank, kind of did their 2-year analyst program, and spent most of my career working in hedge funds, both as a research analyst and as a portfolio manager. And that was very interesting work. You tackle difficult problems. You work with highly intelligent people. It tends to be very competitive. You're definitely operating in high beta most of the time. Um, but I think I got to the point where I didn't want to do it forever. I realized that it was taking a certain toll, and I also felt that there was some need inside of me that needed to be expressed that wasn't being addressed by working in finance. And, I kind of ignored that impulse for a long time. And, when you do that, it's interesting because I think your higher self, it's not going to take no for an answer, you know? And so you can either kind of heed the call and follow, or you're typically presented with some type of a crisis. And so, I feel like much of my adult life, I've kind of been lurching from one crisis to the next. And, that has sort of informed my path. But, I never had more than I could handle. And I think, looking back on it, it all unfolded in the best possible way. I think the precipitating event that I had as an adult was the death of my father. So that happened when I was around 33, and my dad was relatively young. He was 65. He was very into this stuff, and so backing up even further, I think the first time I ever heard of Hemi-Sync was when I was flying back from college. I think for like Christmas or Thanksgiving or I don't know, some break. And back then, the in-flight magazine for United, I think it was called Hemispheres or something, had ads in there, and one of the ads was for Hemisync. And so it kind of showed the image of, the neuromap brain. It showed like incoherent brainwave frequencies, and then like your brainwave frequencies on Hemisync. They're nice and coherent. And I don't know, I don't recall what the copy was exactly, but it was something like, achieve peak states or, realize your human potential with Hemisync. And I can remember seeing that and thinking, wow, that looks pretty cool. Like I wonder if that works. And so like several years went by, and I think I was home for Christmas break or something when I was probably working my investment banking job, and I don't know, working 80 or 90 hours a week. And I came home, and my dad had like the full Gateway Experience set sitting out there. They were in CDs, and I think you'd only open like the first wave, and the rest were shrink wrapped still. And I saw them, and I was telling my dad, it's like, yeah, I've seen these before. Like I've seen these in the magazine, on United. And he's like, yeah, those are pretty cool. You should check them out when you're home. And I said, yeah, I will, but I didn't. And several more years went by. And I was kind of having my hedge fund career, and was doing pretty well. Success is relative, but I was earning a pretty high income at a pretty young age. And so outwardly, like everything seemed to be going great. But again, like these feelings inside of me that, there was a path that I needed to take, or, creative faculties that I needed to express that were not being, my current role in finance was not sort of a conduit for that. I started to feel that at around that time. And then in 2009, this was after the global financial crisis. My dad kind of ran into some financial trouble. I had to bail him out. We had like a big falling out over that, a big fight. And then he died. And so I was kind of like, fuck, man, this is like not a great situation, like not a good outcome. And so like my heart really felt that. And I think up to that point, I had become pretty skilled at, I think skilled is maybe not the right word, but I had built up this protective layer around my heart to, keep it safe, or what I thought was keeping it safe. Because as a young person, I think it was actually quite sensitive. And like it just didn't seem like right for the world. And so I built up all these defense mechanisms to protect my heart. And then, when he died and like left on bad terms, it just kind of like ripped all over. And so I started feeling all of the shit that like I hadn't felt since I was a little kid. I was like bawling for days, and I wanted to go see him, and at that time felt like he was still close and that it was possible somehow. At around that time, it was in the early days of the Joe Rogan podcast. And lots of people might be turning off right around now, but bear with me. Back in those days, his show was pretty different. Like he would talk a lot about like getting fucked up and going into float tanks, and he was actually like giving away float tanks for a period of time. And like that sounded pretty interesting to me for some reason. And I Googled it, and like there was a float tank place in Venice Beach, which was near where I used to work in Santa Monica. And so one day after work, I went over there, and they kind of shower up, you get clean, you go into this tank that is very dark. The water is heated to like 91 degrees. There's like 2,000 pounds of Epsom salt in there. So like you're floating, you're very buoyant. You're sitting higher up out of the water than you ordinarily would. And so they give you like these goggles to protect your eyes because like if the salt water gets in there, it stings a lot. You're kind of in water like up to like your mid ear, right around there, and you start to lose perception of your physical boundaries. So like you don't know kind of where your physical body ends and where the water begins. It's pitch black, so you don't see anything. It's a sensory deprivation tank, basically. So I was in there for like, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half, 90 minutes. And it was very pleasant. I felt deeply relaxed. But not much was happening. And so, I went to get up and I realized that I couldn't really move my body. I was kind of paralyzed and, not totally paralyzed. Like, I think on some level, I knew that if I really exerted lots of effort, I could move, but I somehow knew enough not to do that. And then these vibrations started happening. Like it started in my chest, and then it spread to like my lower abdomen, then back up to my chest, to my head. And like before I knew it, like my whole body was vibrating. And the next thing I knew, I was shooting out through the top of my head, like I think like the crown area, and like traveling very far, very fast, and like going through what seemed like a vortex or like a wormhole. And as this was happening, like I knew I was having an out of body experience, and kind of the elation and the you know incredulity of having an out of body experience quickly transformed into this fear that I was having a heart attack, because that's what my dad died of, a heart attack. And so when I thought, okay, like I want to go see him, like I didn't want to go see him like that. Like, I wasn't ready to die. And so as soon as that fear factor kicked in, like wham, I was back in my body. But while the OBE lasted, it was spectacular. It was like traveling through this like light wall tunnel with like all these different colors, like rotating and sparkling, and it felt more real than real. Like it didn't feel like a dream at all. It was like more real than everyday physical reality. And it's hard to explain. But like when I came out, I knew that I screwed it up. Like that could have lasted longer. It was an OBE, and I wasn't dying. I was fine, and I screwed it up. And so I showered up, went outside, and the float tank attendant, the dude's name, this guy was classic. He was like a total like Venice Beach burnout. I think the guy's name was like Crash or something. And
Nice.
I was like telling him about this experience that I had. And he's like, "Oh man, you had an OBE and you totally fucked it up, man. You got to come back and do it again." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. I did, and I will. I'll come back and I'll try it again." And I went back a couple more times. Like it just wasn't the same. Like it didn't happen again. It was still cool. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't an OBE. So I started researching how I could replicate having an OBE. And, the name that kept coming up was Robert Monroe. And the other name that kept coming up was William Buhlman, who, at the time, and like I would argue still is probably the world's greatest living expert on the out of body experience. The other one was Robert Bruce, who sadly passed recently. But both of them, all three of them, have been hugely influential on me. So that rang a bell because after my dad passed, um, you know, well, I should back up a little bit. Robert Monroe's name rang a bell because I remembered seeing it. Um, I knew he was the Hemisync guy, and I remembered seeing it, back at my dad's house, my parents' house, and in those in-flight magazines all those years ago. And after my dad passed, I basically inherited all of his stuff because they were between houses and it was sitting in my garage. So I decided to go out to the garage and start going through boxes to see if I could find those CDs. Like, are they still there? And so I was digging around for a while, and sure enough, I opened this box, and there's the Gateway Experience set. And like the last like 5 or 6 of them, like were still shrink wrapped. It was only the first one that was opened. And he had filled out this application to attend Gateway Voyage at Monroe Institute and had never sent it in. And so, like I mentioned, William Buhlman as well. I was reading up on what he was up to these days because, Bob Monroe had long since passed. And it just turned out that William Buhlman had just begun teaching an out-of-body workshop at Monroe Institute. And so this was, and it was going to happen in like the summer of 2010, I think it was. And I was going to be back east at that time anyway, visiting my in-laws. And so I arranged to go down to the Institute to take Bill Buhlman's OBE workshop. It was only the second one he had ever given there. So back then it was only, I think, 3 days. So I started getting into it. I took the OBE intensive in 2009. I took Gateway Voyage the following. I took the OBE intensive in 2010. I took Gateway Voyage the following year in 2011, and various other classes after that. And I became a trainer in 2015. And in 2015, this was around the time that I finally left the hedge fund job. Not entirely of my own volition, but the firm that I was at had kind of run its course. It was no longer generating huge returns. It was not hugely lucrative for me to work there anymore. And it just all kind of came to an end. And like I didn't feel like getting another finance job. So I kind of bounced around a little bit. As I became a trainer at the Institute, I got to know Bob's kids, who still owned Hemi-Sync. So Hemi-Sync and the Institute were two separate organizations. Bob, I think, separated them in like 1985. And so like all the intellectual property, the record label, basically, the technology was in this company called Interstate Industries, Inc. It's better known as Hemi-Sync. And, I was actually made aware of that several years before. And when I found out about that, I had the thought, like being a finance guy, like, oh, like that's a company, like that can be acquired. So I think I actually like set the intention to acquire it probably back in like 2011. Around late 2016, it came to my attention that Hemisync was available for sale. And, there are other people circling it, including the Institute, ostensibly. And for whatever reason, which, it's still kind of not totally known to me, the family selected me as the buyer. So I acquired it in March of 2017. And I set about turning it around because at that time it was kind of suffering. It had several years of declining sales and was losing money, which is maybe part of the reason why other people didn't want to buy it. I don't know. But I saw lots of opportunity in it, and kind of digitized it. We built an app, rebuilt the website, started releasing more product, trying to partner with more collaborators that we felt were kind of further afield from what we had done historically and would expand the audience. And all of those initiatives pretty much worked. So, I think it was equal parts skill and luck. But it's been really edifying work for me, and I'm very grateful for it. So yeah, that kind of catches us up to present day, I guess.
Wow. That is an amazing story. And that um that entry point through your dad is I was not expecting that. Um and just super curious. Like, was your family like spiritual at all? Were they religious at all? What kind of background did you come from in that regard?
Definitely not religious. My dad, I think, was always kind of a seeker. So, growing up, I went to, well, briefly, I went to a Krishnamurti school. I don't know if you know who Jiddu Krishnamurti is, but he was kind of an Indian teacher who came to America, um, in I guess like the 60s. But it was really kind of, um, I don't know if he ever became a big thing, but he certainly had a lot of people that read his works, that went to his talks, um, well into the 80s. And so, and like my dad was into like Sufism and Dzogchen and
Nice.
yeah, like all kinds of Eastern traditions, or Middle Eastern traditions as well.
Yeah, so he's kind of a closet mystic of
Yeah, not even
sorts.
closet. Like it was
Not closet.
his thing. Yeah, and like I mean, I inherited like I don't know 500 books,
Yeah.
including all Bob Monroe's books, and um, so I was always kind of surrounded by that stuff, and when I was really little, like I don't know, like 4 or 5 years old, like I would like see things that other people were not seeing, and it would kind of like freak my mom out, and I sometimes try like talking to other kids at school about it, and like I just very quickly figured out that like I was a little different. Like other people like were not seeing the shit. And so on some level, like I think like I just wanted to be normal and I kind of like suppressed all that stuff. And went like very like analytical, like left brain. And uh yeah, it's interesting kind of how it all came full circle, but like as an adult, I was able to kind of combine those things um, in a way that was really unique. Like, I don't think I'm necessarily the best at in the world at meditating or at finance and investing, but when you kind of stack up a lot of unusual traits that you're pretty good at, like you build a composite that is very unique. And so, it might just be that like for whatever reason, I'm the best person in the world to run Hemisync. And like it wasn't something that I set out to do. It's just I think a lot of life, of finding your path is trusting your gifts, trusting your inner guidance, and eventually you find the opportunity or the situation that is most aligned with your gifts and skills, talents. Um, Whereas, like, I think a lot of what we teach kids nowadays is like, you've got to be like the best in like, STEM. Like, that's probably the most common academic discipline now. And like, no, I mean, like, if you're cut out for that, great. But like, a lot of that I think is, round hole, square peg.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that for you as you're telling that story. Like, you've done an amazing job with Hemisync, and you know, I really feel in the sound healing space in general, like the work that Hemisync is doing is so unique and so special that, like, what occurs to me when I hear you say that story is the right person to keep it alive came into the picture. And having that background in finance, like this is also like how I spent my 20s. I spent my 20s like doing stuff like why was I doing that? And it was like all leading up to stuff up to the work that I'm doing now that I could have never like foreseen at that time. And I feel like it's maybe the same thing that you're describing here is um kind of having to go through a different type of gauntlet in order to actually get to the more authentic work. Um yeah. And I've heard you talk many times, not many times, I've heard you talk a few times about your own psychic experiences and seeing things when you were a kid and stuff. And um, was it like spirits? Was it, how would you describe that?
I used to see, it's like my earliest memory of seeing things that like other people pretty clearly weren't seeing, but like I thought like they were just there, was this woman, kind of dressed in white, radiant, glowing even, like it's like blonde or like white silver hair. Um, like I'd see her kind of outside in the rose garden and in my parents' bedroom. Like those were kind of like the two places that I saw her the most. And like I didn't know quite what to think of her. She felt comforting, but also like I could tell like she was different. Um, I'd go out and like tell my mom like, oh, like the lady in your bedroom was there again, and she'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? And she'd like go in there like there's no one there. Um, and so she like I didn't have the vocabulary for it at that time, but like I think she was probably an angel. Just
Yeah.
my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm.
After I heard enough times that like it wasn't real, like I just kind of stopped seeing her. So when I was like 4 or 5. Um, you know,
And incidentally, like around that age, your brainwaves as a kid are actually still in that brainwave state that
yeah,
that you actually are trying to get to in the gateway experience,
right,
for example.
right,
So, you know, yeah, wow.
yeah,
Have you reawakened? And we're going to tie this back into sound healing and therapeutic sound here in a bit, but it's all really so tied together. Like sound is non-physical, and what we're talking about right now are like non-physical energies, non-physical presences. And when you're talking about out-of-body experiences, that's very non-physical. These all interrelate. So if you're wondering where the sound healing comes in, we're gonna get there. Yeah, have you reawakened that part of yourself since you've been involved with the gateway experience and hemisync?
yeah. I mean, I generally don't. Well, that's not totally true. Like, I guess from time to time, I will train certain skill areas, like whether it's OBE technique or lucid dreaming or remote viewing, which I guess is more like directly psychic. They all require quite a bit of dedication and discipline. And like, I just don't find that, for me at least, they're sustainable over long periods of time. I tend to come back to them over time, and renew my interest. But yeah, I tend to rotate. I would say like the heart of my practice is just a seated meditation practice. Um, and there are some variations on it. Like it might involve humming, chanting, like you recently did a video on. Very, very effective. I like to use mantra.
Mm-hmm.
There are various types of seated meditations that I do. Kind of the most fundamental, I think, is just establishing awareness and presence in my lower belly, which some people refer to as the koth or the lower dantian. It establishes a real sense of I amness, of just being here. Um, from there, I might do like a microcosmic orbit meditation. And so, like, I'll stimulate my root chakra, I'll kind of pull the energy up to my crown, third eye, throat, chest, and then down through my abdomen, back to the root, and just kind of circulate it. And like I'll visualize the colors, what are usually thought of as the traditional colors of the energy centers as I do them. And then there's also I think like a third main meditation I'll do is just a non-doing meditation where you just sit there and do nothing. And like it sounds simple, but it is actually, I think, the most I don't want to say advanced because people get too into their heads about, especially in spiritual circles, that people I think get too into their heads about well, like what's higher, like what practice is higher than the other practice, or like what's the highest level, like what's the highest focus level, like what's the highest form of attainment or enlightenment or self-realization, self-actualization. And like I don't think there's an answer to that. Like it's not linear in the way that we think of 3D reality. Um, it's boundless, infinite, and like constantly unfolding. And there are all types of realizations that you can have. And I don't think there's an endpoint to any of it. But non-doing, this realization that there is nothing you have to do, there is nothing that needs to be fixed. I actually think that is one of the highest forms of realization that you can have. To the extent that that really settles in and you actualize it, um, that's a pretty big deal.
I love that. And one of my medicine songs that I sing, just like in my own practice, are actually some words by Matt Kahn. I don't know if you're familiar with Matt Kahn. He's a spiritual teacher, kind of in the realm of Eckhart and those folks. He has these repeat after me's, and one of them was like super lyrical and rhymey, and
Mm.
it stuck with me for a few years after I heard it. And it's there's nowhere to be and nothing to do but to be in open space where love pours through.
Yeah.
And after just like having that cycle back through my mind for a few years, I put it to music, and that's like one of my go-to medicine songs now,
Yeah.
especially in this culture with such an emphasis on work and accomplishment. Um, it's been super healing for me, and yeah, um, I'm happy to hear you say that because it's like the ultimate thing to do is to let go in some ways.
Yeah.
And there are, yeah, I want to tie this into the gateway experience a little bit because it's it's like when you can actually what I was learning when I was reading over the gateway papers before this interview, it is basically we're in a space where we are being held by so many forces outside of ourselves, and just to kind of like distill everything from the gateway papers down, it was really basically about tuning the human instrument. And if you want to think about this in sound healing terms as the human body being an instrument and cycling energy like in the microcosmic orbit, or holding an intention and like a certain feeling of love or gratitude or whatever, it's it's this place where you're tuning and resonating with actually the greater cosmos and the energetic web around you in such a way that you become a part of this continuous energetic medium in a way more like aligned, harmonious way, and that allows the consciousness to leave the body. And that's kind of what I was gathering when I was reading these gateway papers. And part of doing that, you don't have to use binaural beats, you don't have to use music and sound, but they really really help to actually tune the physical body into a place where you really can melt into more of the fabric, the energetic fabric of reality, as opposed to just being this like individual separated entity. Um, how does that land with you? Is that summation?
It's really good, Nicholas. There's a lot in there. I'm just trying to kind of pick a spot and maybe build on it. Um, so, I mean, you're right that you don't have to have hemisync to access these states. Um, hemisync is kind of like training wheels.
Yeah.
I mean, we have so much conditioning built up, um, around who we are, what we take ourselves to be, that is informed by how we were raised, our education, our religion, our profession, our relationships. And it's very hard to have a sense of ourselves beyond that. And the way that you get that broader overview, that sense of higher self or deeper self, is to kind of quiet all of that down. You're quieting down the monkey mind. And, that's not a new insight. Meditation has been a thing for thousands of years for that very reason. But, I think modern Western people are so heavily conditioned that many of them will, say, sit on a cushion and they just find it very, very difficult. They're fighting their body, they're fighting their mind. Nothing really happens for them. Hemisync kind of helps to jumpstart that process so that people that are new to meditation can have a deep experience much more readily. And experienced meditators might be able to hold a deeper state for much longer. It helps to lay down neural pathways. So once those neural pathways are established, though, you don't necessarily need the binaural signal in quite the same way that you might have at the outset. It can still be helpful. I still use Hemisync on a fairly regular basis, but not all the time. Again, my foundational practice is still a seated meditation. In terms of becoming part of the broader fabric of reality or consciousness, as I think you put it. For those that don't know, the document that is commonly referred to as the CIA Gateway Report is a document on the CIA's website, and it was created in, I think, 1983 by the Department of Army Intelligence. They wanted to understand how Hemisync and the Gateway experience can help to basically transcend space-time, which sounds crazy, but for the purposes of gathering intelligence. That was sort of the impetus for the document. And so they employed this, I think, Lieutenant Colonel, his name was Commander Wayne McDonnell, to kind of go take the program and write a report about it. And so he had to put together a kind of ontological framework for explaining all of it. And that framework was really informed, I think, chiefly by the work of a guy named Itzhak Bentov, who wrote a couple of books. I think his best one is called Stalking the Wild Pendulum. But Bentov was basically a genius and a polymath. He also invented a medical device called the steerable catheter, and started a biotech company that today is basically Boston Scientific, which is like a $100 billion market cap company. But he died super young in a plane crash. But before he did, he made quite a few valuable contributions to consciousness research that I think actually transcend what he did in medical devices, even though that became a $100 billion company. And so one of Bentov's ideas, which best I can tell, it's borrowed heavily from the early works of transcendental meditation. There's a book, it's escaping me at the moment, but if you read it, you can see how it influenced Bentov. But Bentov has this concept of the absolute, which is basically energy in its undisturbed state. So it's infinite, it has no limit. It's kind of the primordial, undisturbed stuff of reality. And as the absolute becomes disturbed, it creates these emanations that transcend through different dimensions, leading to this kind of 3D physical reality that we inhabit. And there's this idea that the universe is holographic. So each component of the universe kind of contains the whole, and that includes us. And so within us, we have the capacity to experience the absolute and really all of reality. It's just a matter of tapping into it. And the way you tap into it is by modulating your vibrational frequency, which again goes back to sound, because everything makes sound, right? Even a cell that is oscillating very, very rapidly Like you can't hear it, but that is another way of saying that, it's making sound. Everything makes sound. Everything's vibration. Um, so I don't know. That's a bit of a tangent, but hopefully
Oh,
that's
it's super important. I mean, you know, I I found as I've moved into this field of sound healing, um, I've always had like an inclination towards like a more spiritual perspective on the world, but we are raised in this hyper materialistic paradigm and culture, and the more you actually get into studying sound waves, light waves, um, just particles moving, and trying to understand how all of this stuff actually fits into a healing modality, the more you actually begin to realize, like, yeah, everything is energy and motion. Even things that are appearing to be solid are energy. And there's, for example, like the slowest wavelength of visible light is the red wavelength, and it vibrates at 436 trillion waves a second. Like,
no,
you can't even say that before it's already happened.
no,
And that's always coming off of the sun. And then the highest wavelength of visible light, it's like the indigo blue at the top of the rainbow color spectrum, is like 780 trillion waves a second,
no,
for example. Whereas the human hearing spectrum is actually 20 waves a second, 20 to 40 waves a second, to about 15,000 to 20,000 waves per second. And you start looking at all of these different spectrums of wavelengths and electromagnetic frequency, and yeah, it starts to kind of make sense how there's a limit to what we can perceive with our eyes. There's a limit to what we can perceive with our ears.
yeah.
And in some ways you could argue that we are blind.
Oh
We're
yeah,
even with the amazing senses that we have, we're still blind to so much of the energetic world that's around us.
right.
And you kind of have to take on that perspective, and in order to really understand how something like the gateway experience can be a real experience for you, and how it's actually possible. um that's my yeah, I mean, I was blown away when I read the CIA report. I actually wished I had read it sooner. There was a lot of really beautiful stuff in there that I could understand because I had that sound healing background. But I know not everybody has a background in those topics, and so for a lot of people, it is a brand new world when you get into it. Which is why you have like training programs, and why you actually aren't just like the CEO of this company, but you're also like educating people actively on how to actually get into the gateway experience and have out of body experiences and tap into these energetic patterns in the mind and the body that allow you, because it's sympathetic resonance, right? Like when you're talking about something you said earlier, the vibration of a cell, even you're sympathetically resonating your body to the essentially the Schumann resonance, is what I was gathering from the papers, which is an electromagnetic force that's pretty much always cycling through the earth. um but yeah, it's amazing, beautiful thing. I personally haven't had any out of body experiences that I'm aware of. Maybe a few lucid dreams. I've got a lot of room to grow, but like you've been practicing this for a while now, right? It's something that you've got a pretty firm grasp on.
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of OBE, so I mean, I think a lot of people kind of hold up astral projection or the out of body experience as some great spiritual attainment. And it might be, but for others, could just be an indication that you've had a lot of trauma and you dissociate. Um, and so, I don't think you have to necessarily have an OBE to make a lot of progress in terms of expanding your consciousness. And like the gateway experience makes no promises that you're going to have an OBE. What it does is it allows yourself to learn how to relatively quickly and easily shift your state of consciousness to areas where you're expanded beyond regular physical matter reality. And so in these states, you can access guidance, you can heal past wounds and traumas, you can manifest health or prosperity. You can kind of get glimpses of, for lack of a better word, other realms. You don't have to be classically out of body where like, you have this visceral sense of leaving your body and like you're observing it from like, some outside perspective and like you keep moving further and further from your physical body. You don't necessarily have to have that. I think it's most helpful to think of the out of body experience along a spectrum, where, on one end, you might have the classical out of body experience. You might have just like a sense of being in like more than one location at the same time. So like you still have some sense of your physical body, but you're also, aware that you're somewhere else or like interacting with a different being or a different environment. Um, so I don't think so. In a lot of ways, I think the emphasis on having the OBE, which is kind of what everybody wants, is misplaced. It doesn't mean that it's not very valuable. I think it's really valuable in overcoming the fear of death. But once you've had that experience, like, even once can really, I think, go a long ways towards overcoming the fear of death. I think the value of it is greatly diminished. And you can have, like, there's a certain inefficiency to trying to get out of body too. So there's like a whole process you go through where you try to like access a mind awake body sleep state or a trance state. Probably spend like, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes trying to get into that. You'll do a technique, like maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Whereas if you just kind of get into a relaxed state, a receptive state, and shift your consciousness, you can go and explore without a classical OBE. It's still, I think, along the OBE continuum, but it's not the classical OBE. And I actually think it's more efficient.
I'm so glad you said that, actually, because I definitely see a lot of people putting the OBE on a pedestal.
Right.
And, like you were saying, it seems like maybe that's just one way of receiving guidance or receiving information.
Mm-hmm.
But, there are other ways, like there's many paths to getting intuitive downloads. And one of the things that like blew my mind when I was reading the CIA report was basically when you've used the binaural beats and you've synchronized your hemispheres and you've also gotten your heart rate to actually match essentially the Schumann resonance, and it's gotten rid of that bifurcation echo, so that it's actually sending a resonant signal all throughout your body, because the heart actually sends information every time it beats. It's not just blood that it's sending. There's, depending on the pressure wave of the heart and the blood vessels, it's sending signals of like all kinds of different signals throughout the body to indicate to your cells whether you're safe, whether you're in fight or flight, whatever the case may be. But one of the things that blew my mind about the papers is once you've gotten into that state of sympathetic resonance with the Schumann resonance, that the field that is constantly surrounding the earth, a thought pattern, a thought wave can circumnavigate the entire earth in 1/7 of a second, is what they were saying in the paper. And that's like how you could explain telepathy. That's how you could explain psychic communication.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so awesome.
Yeah, and like
And
to me, like I think psi phenomenon is like a proven fact. Like if you read the books of Dean Radin, like he basically compiles enough scientific evidence to prove psi phenomenon. Like he probably should have won a Nobel Prize for it at this point. The only real criticism of it is that there isn't a methodology, like a mechanism by which you can explain how the psi phenomenon happens. And so that's why conventional science doesn't accept it. I think the mechanism is that consciousness is actually what is fundamental to all of reality. Like matter is derived from consciousness, not vice versa. But many hardcore materialist scientists do not want to accept that. Like that's sacrilege. But I think that is like how you explain it. It's just that there's a certain faction of science that doesn't want to accept that. But yeah, it's all very explainable and actually makes a lot of sense.
yeah, and that's how things like distance healing can be a real thing. I know a lot of people who practice long distance Reiki or long distance
Mhm.
sound healing through Zoom or something like that, or not even with a person.
Yeah.
And I think that is part of how the framework of how you can see how that stuff can actually be effective. And I've had some really interesting experiences sending energy to people and like them telling me later like, whoa, like I had the best day I've had in a long time. you know
Yeah.
and people who are not having a particularly happy time in life. And yeah, it's amazing. It's a very mysterious world, and I think the more that we open to how little we know,
Yeah.
um, that can really open us up to the miracles a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that's a great way to put it. I mean, it's all a huge unfolding mystery. And that's I think the beauty of it. It's like there's so much unknown and like so much to discover. Because and like I think also part of our Western orientation is to want to know everything, to think that I am the one who knows, like I have the answers. Um, but like when you actually think about it, like what happens when you have, say, a romantic partner that you know everything about, what you think you know everything about, but there's like nothing left to discover. Like what happens to the relationship? What happens to your interest in that partner? Like it just wanes, right? And so really like the good stuff, the action is in the not knowing. Like that's the juicy stuff.
Totally, it makes me want to go down a bunch of rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really want to circle back to, because we've gotten into a bit of the out of body experience side of Gateway. And so if it's not the out of body experience thing, what would you say is really like what are some of the main ways that you're seeing people actually use this stuff for healing or for just improving their lives outside of the out of body state?
Yeah, I mean, rather than the classical out of body state, I think it's in accessing expanded states of consciousness to obtain a broader overview of yourself, to reconsider who you are and what you take yourself to be, and to have some understanding that you are actually not this limited person that is defined by their past experience, again, by their education or where they were born or who their parents are or who their friends are, what they do for work. They are a powerful, immortal, spiritual being. And once you really understand that, like everything changes. And so I think many of the problems that the world faces that seem unsolvable and intractable, like they are, but they're unsolvable from this limited worldview that most of the world's population currently holds. And so, I like to think of Hemi-Sync's work as um, helping more people to reconsider who they actually are and who they take themselves to be. Because when you're so reliant on your thoughts, beliefs, and your fears, like you're really kind of in a cage, like you're in a prison. Because once you have a belief, like you need to defend it, right? Because like you hold it to be true. And if some other person in a different camp has a different view, like you're going to have conflict because you both have to defend your worldview. And like even if it means, killing the other person in extreme cases. And so I think once you shift to this broader overview, that you appreciate that in the fullness of the universe, like paradox abounds. And so given a broad enough overview, like almost anything can be thought to be true or considered to be true, which is a bit of a mind fuck. But when you start to understand that, like you're much less attached to your belief systems, if that makes sense. And so for humanity, like I think that is the number one. Like all the other stuff, like, healing your own wounds, whether they be emotional, even physical, yes, that's possible. Again, like it involves getting out from your limited sense of self, and obtaining this broader overview, accessing higher energy and incorporating it into your life. Again, like you can consciously like change your vibrational frequency, whether it be, whole body, a particular affected area, you can shift. And, that is broadly applicable, across your life, whether it be relationships, profession, mental health, physical health. And those are all potential application areas once you understand kind of who and what you actually are.
Wow. Yeah, so this whole idea of reprogramming your belief systems, I think is another part of the work at the heart of the gateway experience, right? And that's really the main way that it's applied for healing. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because in some ways, especially like the beliefs around death, like you mentioned, I think that's potentially like the most toxic belief actually to our physical health, which is also a paradox that
Yeah.
this concept of death could actually kill you. But that seems to be what runs so much of our more negative expressions in the world as
Yeah.
a species, and as individuals, like all the conflict we have around right now. It's, well, I've got to kill you before you kill me.
It's like totally wrong-headed.
Yeah, there's that whole thing. Yeah, building the bunkers, like all of these things, or even just on a super mundane level, like for something that everyone can relate to, like food. I must have 3 meals a day or I'm going to die. you know and actually that belief is probably doing more harm than many things, because we're actually kind of overdoing it, for the most part, from what I can see. And I've worked in the health food and nutrition side of wellness for a while. And yeah, the benefits of fasting, I talk about a lot. I think of fasting as a sound healing practice because it's a waveform. Your period of eating is a wave, and then you need to have this down rest point where your body can reset. And so I actually think of like schedules and calendars and all of these types of ways that we organize our lives based on time as a part of the sound healing paradigm. But all that to go back to food and how, that's a belief where I mean, I have it too. I'm not judging. Like if I go more than like 12 hours without eating, like I'm going to start having some crazy thoughts like, "Oh my God, like yeah." So,
It can also be a great way to quiet the mind and actually access expanded states of consciousness as well. Not one of the more popular ones, but nonetheless effective.
not popular in our neck of the world
Yeah,
at least. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I want to ask you because you've got a lot of experience in this. Do you have any really notable experiences that you've had on the gateway process that really stand out and are fun to share?
Um, People ask me that a lot. A lot of kind of like the most profound stuff I think is like kind of personal. Um, I will say that, in terms of like practical applications, I think I've kind of used these tools to actually acquire Hemisync itself. I've used these tools to manifest a lot of things in my life. So Gateway allows you to access a state of no time, which is also kind of colloquially called the void. And this tends to be an ideal locale for manifestation because you kind of go into the space and you create something as if it's already done. You can really feel it and sense it palpably, like it's a thing that exists outside of time, like it's already done. Um, and so when you come back to physical matter reality, you kind of carry that with you. And for something to actually manifest in 3D physical reality, um, I found that it pretty much always happens. Like the amount of time can vary significantly, and it basically depends on how different your idealized manifestation is from the current 3D state. Your sincerity, um, and your intensity.
That's amazing. So, I think when people think of manifestation, it's often like a very materialistic thing. Like, I want to get X, I want to
Right,
get Y.
right.
But you can apply this also to physical health. You could apply this to healing some type of trauma.
Yeah.
And it's not, yeah,
And it needs to be heart centered. Like it can't just be mental.
something that really resonates
Yeah.
with you on a deep level.
You have to feel it, not just think it.
Right. So like if I were to try to manifest being like in some like some amazing world famous circus actor, like it's not really actually on the menu for me, so to speak.
Hmm.
So maybe that wouldn't be something um that would work as much. But if I say wanted to manifest um this podcast so that we can spread more understanding of sound healing and how to actually apply it in their lives in your lives, and I want to do this because I feel like a lot of people are going to get something out of it that will help them. That's something that's way more aligned and maybe is going to have more power. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. Try to think what else. I mean, I've had other experiences in expanded states that, I can probably share that, are just kind of like humorous. Like I think you can also like reality also has a great sense of humor. So one time when I was Focus 12, I think, which is um, it's a state of expanded awareness. Like I can't remember what it was, but I was asking a question and I was like very earnest, I thought, and like very serious. Like I wanted a serious response, like a real response. And so I was kind of in this, like I had this sense of like this like kind of relatively dark space, but there was like this horizon line, and there's some light kind of coming over the horizon. And so like you kind of like put your question out there and you push it out into all directions, right? So I did that, waiting for my response, and I see this like pink thing starting to extend over the horizon. It's kind of like going up, 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 like into what I guess is like the proverbial sky. Then it's kind of coming down, and it's coming like towards me. And as it comes towards me, I realize that it's this like giant tongue. It's like a huge purple tongue, and it basically hits me and like knocks me over, and I'm like covered in saliva, and I hear this laughing, and like that was the answer. Like that was the entire answer. And like what I got from it is like, lighten up. You don't have to take yourself so seriously, and there was a general sense of like goodness in it. Like there's healing, I think, in laughing and in humor. And so like lots of the messages that you get in these expanded states are symbolic, like they're not literal. Sometimes they can be literal, like certain psychics actually receive messages in words. I've never really had that experience. It's always been symbolic, metaphorical, can be auditory or kinesthetic. Like everyone is kind of unique in how they access these locales, these states, and that's part of the fun of the journey, part of the fun of exploration.
Wow. So that's almost like a divination practice, and the way that you were just talking about it in terms of asking a question.
Yeah.
And except it's a mental, it's more of a subconscious mental experience of an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever have the experience where the answer comes later on and
Oh, yeah.
not? Yeah,
Very common. Mm-hmm.
sweet.
So you have to kind of like stay alert for it. Notice synchronicities, notice little cues. Like a lot of training your consciousness is just learning to pay more attention. You're paying more attention to your present experience, not just when you're practicing, but in your day-to-day life. Like I kind of have this distinction between transcendent experience, which I think is great for obtaining a broader overview and reconsidering who you are and what you take yourself to be, that you're more than your physical body. And then there's transformative experience, which is usually thought to be less sexy, but it's the actual process of incorporating what you're experiencing in expanded states into your daily living. And so as you establish that, you establish, what I call presence in your daily living, the sense of I amness, of being here. Then the two start to merge, and your quality of consciousness on a daily basis starts to change. And so where previously, your life might feel dull or narrow or constricted, limited, all of a sudden you start to notice, and it might be subtle, that there's a certain ease to your daily living, to your felt experience. And you can notice it even in the mundane, washing the dishes and doing the laundry, brushing your teeth, shaving. There's this depth to it, and this ease to it, a sense of okayness. You're not lost in like mental chatter. And that is how the transcendent informs your everyday living. And so you start to actually have a sense of the sublime and even mundane things.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So much of the consciousness work seems to be finding more stillness so that you can actually just even pick up on the signals that are just floating around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like again, it goes back to, what we perceive in terms of vibrational frequency, both with regard to light, sound, but other things as well. There's all types of sensory input that we're getting, and we're only kind of consciously aware of like a very slim portion of it. So yeah, a lot of it is just starting to pay more attention.
That's what I find, going back to the idea of the body as an instrument. Um, I didn't know this till I started studying sound healing, but the chakras are actually there's a physical gland for every chakra in the body. And that's actually a part of the endocrine system. It is a part of the energy system of the body. And that's what I feel like is a big part of our ability to sense outside of our senses is, when someone says something and your third eye lights up, or when somebody says something and your heart opens, versus you can feel a very subtle closing, or like when you think a thought and you feel your heart close related to that thought, or you feel something more in your abdomen. There's all these bodily sensations that to me are like our extra sensory antenna
Right.
for learning to actually navigate the world in a more harmonious way, which super important in relation to sound healing, like being in harmony, being in touch with the flow of life around you. So,
Yeah. Like you're also pointing out that there are these centers of intelligence and understanding in other parts of our body, like our heart, our belly, that aren't just in our head. I think for a lot of modern Western people, it's almost like we're cut off, like below our necks. Like everything is like very mental, very cerebral, and there's not much felt sense in the body. And so, awakening and enlivening the body is also a very important part of this work. If you want to embody the change, if you want to transform.
totally, totally. Well, I want to ask you some questions about your dad,
Mm,
you run these companies, you have a lot of your husband, you know, actually, especially related to your family. What would you say? How is this work informing how you show up as a dad, or even how you um, work with certain challenges that inevitably come up inside of relationships with your kids or your wife or whatever? Are there ways in which this has
yeah,
helped you?
yeah. Um, I think one of the things that I struggle with as a dad or as a husband is in trying to provide an environment where my family can grow and flourish, which requires sometimes putting things right, fixing things without trying to fix them. And I think a lot of traditional parenting, um, that I see observed or that I observed as a kid was in trying to fix the kid. And like, there's nothing wrong with the kid. Like, you have to just offer love, support, and a little guidance, yes, but you can't meddle with them too much. And that's the challenge, is in kind of finding that line, where I'm trying to adjust the experience, adjust the environment, you know, um, and stay present for them without trying to, mentalize my parenting, getting too cerebral with it and meddling.
I'm hearing like more of that non-doing um aspect of things, more of like paying attention to the container that you're
Yeah,
creating as opposed to worrying about like what's showing up inside that container.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And like, I certainly came into parenting with a lot of preconceived notions about like how I was going to do it differently and about how my kids were going to turn out. And, I've had to let a lot of that go. And like, that's true of many of most things in life, really. Like we have these preconceived notions about how things should be. And, reality is just reality. Like the more you try to resist it, like the harder your life gets. Um, and so, I just try to set an intention, And I'm diligent. I take the little steps that I think need to be taken to provide and protect and support. And the rest I try to let go.
So Hemisync is and Gateway has really basically helped you learn to be more in the flow with what's coming up. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Um, no, I think Hemisync has been most helpful for me in allowing me to readily access um, states of consciousness where I can allow where I can allow those things and appreciate the importance of allowing those things.
Nice. Yeah, totally. I feel that one for sure. And I would say that that's been one of my main things with sound healing as well. And actually, why I really, my work, what I feel really called to is helping people learn how to use this stuff in their own lives at home on just like a individual basis. And a huge part of that is because I've seen how it's like not just transformed my interpersonal relationships, my romantic relationship. I don't have any kids, but just being able to show up more with more presence and more calm and also to resonate more compassion and like love and forgiveness when actually the external environment is actually not reflecting that back to me in the moment.
Yeah,
you know I
that's
would say that's been one of the biggest transformations in my own life. And that's really mostly just through my own work with my nervous system and the voice, and not even using the gateway stuff.
yeah.
Although I'm gonna get to gateway one of these days. I am. I'm my curiosity is so peaked right now.
Let me know if I can help.
Yeah, I will. So when it comes to your kids like and hemisync and this work that you're doing, what do they think about it? And
Yeah.
do you talk to them about this stuff? Do you like is there a certain point in their lives in which you might introduce them a little bit more
Yeah.
deeply into it?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I've had to let go as a parent is like I thought I was going to raise meditators. And so from like a young age, like I had them kind of sitting with me and we do basic meditations. And like they appreciated some of it. Like, I think they saw the benefits. But by and large, like they do not want to sit and meditate with me or by themselves. Like I've had to accept that. They do use some hemisync, I think for like doing schoolwork, studying, and sometimes for relaxing. Like they'll they'll listen to a track here and there, um, and like they think it helps. But that's sort of been the extent of it. And like again, like I have to let the rest go.
Totally. Is there a favorite album in your household?
I think for work, like concentration is just the go-to. Like it's just basically pink noise and hemisync. There's no music, but like I find it to be the most effective. Uh, I think for relaxing, like I think one of them likes Deep Ten, and then I think one of them likes Seaside Slumber. Different
Interesting.
different folks. Yeah.
Nice. Wow. Yeah, what that made me think of is like the a child's brain, it's so crazy. It actually follows the different brainwave states in synchronization with the number of years they've been alive. So when when a baby's first born, like the first couple of years, they're only in delta brainwaves.
Hmm.
And then from like 3 or so till 7, they move into theta brainwaves.
Yeah.
And then 7 actually is around that cusp of where theta moves into alpha. And when the brain, when a child reaches 7 years old, from 7 to 14, they enter the alpha brainwave state. And then 14 hertz is right around the cusp of where the brain moves from alpha to beta,
Mm.
and around 14 years old is when they move into that beta,
Yeah.
and actually have more of those conscious adult functioning
Adulthood.
brainwaves.
Yeah.
And what it makes me think of is like, I didn't really need meditation until I got like into college or into the workforce, and I was like, until I was overbaited,
Yeah.
until I was like so overstimulated, so burning out over and over and over again. Um, so maybe that's also just a part of like the journey of many young people is actually just like kind of needing to crest out on that wave to be like, oh, I need to calm down, you know, and then to actually begin that journey of introspection and learning to actually work with their own thoughts, emotions, and energies in a way that's not just all like hyped up, gotta go, 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 do. Yeah.
Well, I think what's so challenging is that like a lot of high performing individuals, like successful like type A individuals, like they think that like high beta brainwave state is like the way to be. It's the place to be. And so like a lot of workplaces are like suffused with that. Like it can be difficult to be around. Um, and like if you can shift into low beta, like it's more sustainable, you'll be just as productive, you can better survive. Um, and then when you get home, like it's important to really downshift and learn how to relax. Like a lot of people think relaxing is like watching TV and like having a beer at the end of the day. And like that's not it. And so I think one of the primary benefits of Hemisync for people that haven't really used it before is they really get into a deeply relaxed state for maybe the first time in their adult lives. And they realize like, oh, this is what it feels like to actually relax. And then once you have that feeling, once you lay that neural pathway, you can go back into that state more readily. And so from there, you can rest, recharge, revitalize, and not make yourself sick.
Nice. Yeah, totally. The neural pathways thing, I think, yeah, that sounds like such a key part of hemisync.
Yeah.
It's like when you've been like eating something that's been poisoning you for for a
Right.
while, and then you remove it from your diet and you're like, "Oh, I feel better than I have in years."
Yeah.
And you didn't even realize that your baseline feeling of normal was
Yeah.
so jacked up
Yeah.
until you get to a better feeling place, and then you're like, wow, I actually I didn't even realize I could feel this good.
100%.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you some questions about sound healing because
Okay.
you're obviously in this space of technology. But are there any other sound healing practices that you use on a regular basis? Anything else that's like helped you over the years?
I have some Tibetan singing bowls. I like those. I've got a guitar back here. I like strumming, singing a little bit. Like I'm an intermediate player at best and like not a very good singer, but like it doesn't really matter in terms of, yeah, I mean, I'm not performing. I'm just doing it kind of for my own enjoyment. Um, Listening to music, I think is also like a great way to access sound healing. Like paying attention, like especially to like how it makes you feel, like how it's shifting within you. Um, but yeah, like I mean, again, like going back to like earlier in the conversation, like everything kind of is sound, right? So like a lot of it is again just kind of like paying more attention and like noticing like how you're impacted by certain sounds or certain modalities and noticing it and if it works for you, like going back to it.
Yeah, I think that's super key too, is if it works for you, because I find that there's this misconception that sound healing is one size fits all,
Hmm.
but actually people can need varying things, very different things from one person to the next. And what works for one person might be extremely triggering for another person,
Totally.
um, or harmful, in some other way. So, yeah, that's super key. I love that too that you're using the Tibetan bowls because that's kind of it's got the binaural It's
Yeah,
probably the closest thing to hemisync that you can get from a bowl or from an actual instrument.
it is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you hit the bowl and you like really pay attention, you can tell that there's a far sound and a nearer sound. And like there's a little warble that it creates. So yeah, that was probably the original binaural beat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That and gongs
Yeah.
produce
Like
a lot of multi-layered wobbling.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like different bowls have different frequencies.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have some questions just that I ask every guest to help wrap up the conversation.
Mhm.
And in your experience in the sound healing field, what is the main misconception around sound healing that you see?
Um, main misconception. So I think there's a lot of buzzwords around sound healing right now, whether it be binaural beats or, Schumann resonance or solfeggio. And I think a lot of people think that, or like 3D sound. And like, I think a lot of people think that the best stuff just has like all of this stuff kind of like put together. And like that is not necessarily the case. Like, it's actually very easy to wash out a binaural registration by combining it with, even just simple music. But, if you're combining it with like other audio technology, um, like that can totally wash it out. Um, Certain other sound modalities, I don't want to say that they're BS, but I think their efficacy is maybe unproven. And like I know a lot of people have like beliefs around that, so like I'm not going to like name names, but that is definitely a thing that I see. I'm actually planning on doing a pod with a friend of mine about that coming up, but yeah, so I think just kind of this general sense of looking for the latest and greatest and kind of chasing like the word salad of sound tech. Whereas I think it's most important to find um, stuff from trusted sources that works for you.
Totally. I see that too. And that's honestly one of the main reasons why I even wanted to do this podcast is because um yeah, it's there are a lot of buzzwords and there's a lot of misconceptions around a lot of the buzzwords as well.
Mm.
And it's not to say honestly like um I also refrain from speaking ill about some of these concepts because the power of placebo
Yes.
is maybe the most powerful aspect of the healing in general. And so if you believe something is good for you and it
Yeah.
feels good for you, that's great.
Yeah.
Um,
Like I think
but
one of the interesting things about placebo though is like the measured effect through like clinical like pharmaceutical trials, like the impact of placebo effect has been steadily increasing over time. And so the implications of that I think are interesting. But sorry, like you're about to go into something else.
oh yeah, absolutely. Like I know it's an amazing thing that the belief that you hold about whether something will help you
Mm.
it is almost more healing than the actual thing, whether it's a sound or whether it's a pill or whether it's an herb. Um, you
That,
know,
that
and
again goes back
so
to changing your belief systems.
right, right. But at the same time, there's all this latching on in the sound healing space to like special healing frequencies or
Yeah.
certain healing frequencies. And yeah, and I just I know too much about sound healing to know that it's not one size fits all.
Right.
Um, you know, um, but that's a part of the journey with sound, and that's why I think it's so important, like you said, for everyone to gain their own intelligence and awareness around it for themselves. And based on how it makes you feel, and it can be as simple as that. Um, so when you think about what sound healing has to offer the world, like the peak potential that sound healing as a modality has to offer the world, what comes to mind? Like what would that look like in your opinion?
Um, so again, like I think it goes back to earlier in the conversation where, you know, whether you look at our political systems, our environmental situation, um, you know, we're at kind of this very tough spot where there are like really big problems and like not a lot of solutions, and like a lot of animosity. And like, I don't think you're going to have any solutions through like debate or like sharing of ideas, frankly. Like, I just don't think that's going to work. Um, and so I think the only solution to a lot of our problems is for more people to start doing the type of work that we're talking about. And like, it's work on ourselves. Like, it starts with each of us. Um, and sound, I think, offers an avenue for doing that relatively quickly and easily, and getting out of kind of our mental headspace, our beliefs, our fears, and accessing more of a heart-centered space that is built around feeling. Because you need the heart and the mind working together. Um, and I think far too many of us are too much in our heads and totally cut off from our hearts. So that to me is the promise of it.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I love that. Music has, and sound in general, has a way of putting you in touch with your emotions
Hmm.
and helping you to feel those emotions in a more visceral way.
Yeah.
And that is a huge part of sound healing. In general, is just learning to work with the emotional energies that are cycling through your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Like,
that.
and like when you do that, you realize that everyone else has that potential within them as well. Like, because there's this tendency to, view other people, the other as like this NPC, this like non-player character. But like everyone has the same inner life that you do, and the same, infinite potential. Like, there's this kind of Buddhist saying that everyone is a future Buddha. And like that can be very difficult to see in some people. But it nonetheless, I think, remains true. And, accessing these expanded states of consciousness through sound, I think, are a way of realizing that.
Yeah, I love that. That's that's beautiful and definitely um, a belief that I hope we can all collectively tap into more.
Hmm.
Um, okay, and final question. You've shared a lot on this already, but what would you say the most significant way that working in the field of sound healing has enriched your life in general over these past, I guess, 10, 15 years that you've been in it?
Yeah, I mean, like again, so I mean, there were like a lot of precipitating events in my life that kind of have put me on the path that I'm on. Um, and like I think in the simplest terms, it's been in kind of opening my heart and like, you know, discovering the importance of being vulnerable, because there's so much aliveness and depth of experience that is available in the heart, and it's not it's not there for you if you're not vulnerable. And again, like I think sound is a way of kind of cutting through the mental clutter, the mental uh, constructs to kind of get to that, to that sense of feeling as opposed to, just thinking.
Nice. I love that. And I love that for you. And you're doing such an amazing job with Hemisync. It's really, I feel like that company is just on a huge wave and it's just growing a good wave,
Yeah.
not a city killer. Uh, you know, but yeah, I feel like it's really the beginning of a beautiful future for you and your work with Hemisync. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. And is there somewhere that you'd like to point the audience to learn more about you or find more of the work that you're doing?
Learn more about me. They probably had enough of me, but certainly you can go to hemisync.com and find out more about us there, the products and services we offer. And like Nicholas, I want to thank you for the contributions you made to Hemisync. You've been a really important part of it. So be sure to check out our YouTube channel that Nicholas curates. That's at Hemisync Videos. And of course, we're on all the socials, so you can look for us there too. Usually
Yes.
at Hemisync Life. That's our handle.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, spoiler alert. I've done some work with Hemisync, so enough to know how awesome it is.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to give up the game there, but yeah.
It's okay. Yeah. We're all just collaborating together to just make this uh, a more real modality and a more available modality for people in today's world. And I think it's just so important to build alliances and just work together because there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, there sure is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Garrett. This has been episode 1 of the Sound Healing Revival podcast. If you want to see more of these, please like, share, and subscribe. And let me know what you think of this wild conversation in the comments. I look forward to doing more of these. Until next time, peace.
Thanks. See y'all.